of the revolution in Iran. And here's what's happening on this 5th of February, 2026, live from Israel. You the news about what's going on in the revolution, as well as other geopolitical issues. Today, the focus is on the revolution in Iran because, as of yesterday, remember I told you by Tuesday or Wednesday we would have word from the Trump administration, or we should know from the Trump administration whether or not they had a deal with Iran for Iran to completely end its nuclear weapons programs and drastically reduce its ballistic missiles and basically stop being a threat in the region and around the world. And America said basically, here's the deal, take it or leave it, deal or no deal. And Iran said, well, if that's the case, no deal. It was all or nothing deal, and they said no. A bunch of coverage happened about that, people saying different things, and then later it came out that America basically said, yeah, we didn't expect them to take the deal, or we expected them, or basically it was a bit of a laugh, a comment that they expected the deal to basically be a failure, but they went ahead with it anyway. And for some reason, the U.S. has agreed to speak further with Iran on Friday because they're just playing into the Iranian dictatorship's hands in terms of dragging out the negotiations as long as possible, which may be because Trump just really wants to avoid any kind of armed conflict and find some diplomatic way to get Iran to stop its nuclear ambitions without having to use any military force, or because the U.S. is doing a bit of a head fake, and because Trump loves to do that, he's proven quite adept at it in multiple situations, and he may just be telling them, okay, let's keep talking, and then, maybe hit them when they're least expecting it. We'll see. I can tell you that from the people I hear from in Iran, which is actually a tremendous amount of people at this point, a lot of people have been following me on social media, on Instagram and whatnot, and I've been getting a lot of messages over on my relatively new Instagram channel that I've been posting with my debates and such that I've been doing under the Zentap Talks project. The number of things I'm hearing from Iran. I mean, yes, first of all, the support for what I'm doing is wonderful, but I have to tell you, that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it to support them. I'm doing it to support you, people in Iran, and Iranians living overseas, and abroad in general, because I think everybody should do what they can, and this is, one of the things I can do, is to bring attention to the situation happening in Iran, where right now there's just unfortunately a tremendous amount of horrifying stuff going on. If you know the details, if you know anybody in Iran who's told you, it's bad. And if you don't know, there are still people being mowed down every day, despite the fact that there aren't any massive protests right now happening. There's still people fighting against the IRGC, and even on completely peaceful places, IRGC is reportedly just driving down the street in pickup trucks and just mowing people down, and like with automatic gunfire and everything. They're just blasting away, killing people in the streets. Sometimes they're running over people with their cars. There's plenty of videos of that happening. And apparently the bodies are piling up at the cemeteries, so much so that they don't have time to bury them in any given day. So even at night, when the cemeteries are closed, there's just like mountains of bodies piling up higher and higher. I would be really surprised at this point if the death toll isn't in the six figures. It's probably not even just 100,000. It's probably if not 150,000, 200,000, we don't know. We have no idea. Maybe it's not, but from the sound of it, given the amount of different places that we're hearing from and the ongoing violence that we're hearing from the brutality of the regime, they're just like going all out and just trying to eliminate Gen Z or whatever, like just slaughtering everybody that they can and targeting all people. Yes, targeting people that they know have been in demonstrations and protests or have been fighting against them, but also just killing random people, just completely wantonly shooting and murdering people. From what I've heard, a lot of it is in neighborhoods where there's a lot of people that are likely to be against the regime. But from what I hear, pretty much every neighborhood is against the regime. And yes, you do have, a non-insignificant number of people who support the regime, but it's maybe like 20%. And most of those are people who are either on the payroll or that their family is, or that their livelihood somehow depends on that. Like if they're vendors to vendors, contractors or subcontractors, merchants who sell things that require the approval of the government. So that is a lot of what we're seeing right now. We're also seeing that the USS George W. Bush is headed towards the Persian Gulf. It may be something as simple as rotating out the USS Abraham Lincoln, or maybe adding strength to the presence there. We don't know. We do know a couple days ago, an Iranian drone got close to the USS Abraham Lincoln, which is in the Arabian Sea, and was shot down. We know that there's a lot of activity in Iran preparing for air defenses, and a lot of activity happening in and around the Gulf of U.S. assets moving around, a lot of F-15s moving around in and out of Al Udeid Air Base, and a lot of that is happening in different bases around the region. There are a lot of threat factors that you have to keep in mind that the generals and analysts are looking at to make sure that all the bases are covered, because if the U.S. decides to unleash some kinetic action onto the Ayatollah's regime and against all those IRGC targets they'll have to take out, they want to make sure that they can defend U.S. assets in the Middle East and the assets of their allies, especially like things like oil fields, ports, their own military bases, etc. And of course, allies like Israel. So it's happening. All this stuff is happening, and we don't know if there's going to be any kinetic action. I still truly hope that this is going to happen, despite my skepticism, that it will. I think the people of Iran have shown unbelievable courage, and it is absolutely tragic how many people have died along the way. But if you remember what I've been saying this whole time, this was exactly what was going to happen. If the people of Iran would not do an immediate flash revolution, basically, after a few days of protest, when they still had internet and they still had the ability to communicate more easily. Now they have internet again, mostly, but it's all even more heavily surveilled than before. Yes, they still use VPNs and all these things to communicate, but nevertheless, it is riskier to use internet right now. So they have to be careful with what they do, extra careful, even more than before. And as I said, if they don't do like a flash revolution, from the very earliest days, where they would have, let's say, 3 to 5 million people rush out into the streets and literally overrun all of the institutions and military bases and headquarters and take power very, very quickly, then what we would see is a slow bleeding of the revolution and eventually a suppression of it that'll end it with nothing gained and only piles of bodies to speak for or to show for. And that would be a terrible result. But it is the result that we're heading to unless something kinetic happens. Now, will the entire Ayatollah's regime and IRGC be brought down? Well, if that happens, there will be a power vacuum. And who will fill that power vacuum will be the people with the most guns. So even if the IRGC gets overrun by the people with the assistance of outside forces, there would still be a power vacuum, and they would need to prevent any kind of IRGC, insurgency or basically rebellion against the people. And that might become a civil war. And the fear expressed by other countries is that it would spread out into other countries. But the reality is those other countries would probably do their best to take advantage of the situation and grab the land in Iran. Places like Turkey, Afghanistan, and other ones, without naming all of them specifically, but a lot of countries around Iran would be looking at taking pieces of Iran under their control in the name of protecting their ethnic minorities who live in Iran. But the thing is, that kind of civil war can and should be avoided. And it definitely can be avoided if the right strategy is placed, if the right management is run, if the U.S. military and whoever else they would conduct these attacks with is properly done. They may very well be currently, for all we know, building the necessary local force, right, to do something like that. They may be training either dissidents to go back to Iran very quickly, or they may very well likely be arming people quietly in preparation for helping them take over. But so far we haven't seen any indication of that. So far all we've seen are just a lot of talk and a lot of diplomatic posturing and political posturing, building the political base, as I told you Trump would be doing, because he wants to make sure he shores up political support. And of course, noteworthy to all this is that the NFL Super Bowl happens this Sunday. And you would think, well, that would be, given historical precedents, a time for some kind of attack, right? Like during or shortly after that. However, if you actually look at historical precedents, those things don't usually happen on the actual day of the Super Bowl. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of media money being spent on Super Bowl ads and marketing and media and everything else it covers. The results, the game day itself, or the pre-game day, the game day, and then the post-game. So it's kind of a hectic week in that part of the media world. And that is an important area that politicians want to shore up, is the media support. And if they go around and mess around with the ad revenues from all the NFL media that they expect, then it would very likely cause a disruption. And that would very much displease the owners of said media. And that would not be good for the politicians looking to shore up support for any kind of kinetic campaign. So it may be that they wait some days after the actual Super Bowl itself, maybe even a week or two, or even another month, almost 2 months from now. Not just because of that one game day, obviously, because a lot of events happen on any given month, but there are other reasons that this may take another couple of months. However, it is winter in the Northern Hemisphere, And the U.S. has strategic technical advantages for doing things at this time of the year. They also have technical advantages doing things later when it starts to warm up towards the end of winter and the beginning of spring. But certainly winter is an ideal time to exploit those advantages, especially if they have any targets in places where it's quite cold in Iran right now. And there are some places where it is, some key targets. And there's also a lot of attention on the situation right now. So it means that basically overall, we still have very good conditions for some kind of kinetic attack, possibly by the end of this month, maybe sooner. But, you know, the prediction that I was telling you guys 2 weeks ago, that if it would happen, it would be days, not weeks, is now void, you know. For the time being, it is void. And unless we see some kind of a remarkable turn of events before the end of the weekend somehow, or early next week, I think this is going to drag out, unfortunately, for a lot longer. Maybe months, and maybe not at all. You know, maybe nothing will happen. But again, I hope I'm wrong about that, and I hope the regime is changed ASAP. Free Iran, Javid Israel. I'm Israel Chai, and Shalom. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.